Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about a piece published by the developers of Pax Dei, titled 2025 Developer Retrospective. It's a summary of the year that took the game from early access to version 1.0 and a preview of the direction planned for 2026. First, let me briefly recap what the developers themselves are saying. They remind us that 2025 was a breakthrough year for Pax Dei. The game moved from early access to version 1.0, which launched in October. This marked the end of wipes, full availability on Steam and the Epic Games Store, the arrival on PC Game Pass, and a migration to new technical infrastructure. From the developer's perspective, this was the foundation for Pax Dei's long-term future as a living MMO. A significant part of the retrospective is also dedicated to monetization. Pax Dei follows a buy-to-play model, with an optional subscription required only for owning land plots. Players who don't want to own land can still explore, craft, fight, and engage socially without additional fees. The developers emphasized that throughout 2025, they worked on communicating this model more clearly and responding to community feedback. They also highlight the game's core pillars: a player-driven economy, cooperative building and crafting, social structures, and open-ended exploration. At the same time, they acknowledge ongoing issues: progression pacing, the mid-game experience, communication, and update predictability. According to their statements, these are exactly the areas the 2026 roadmap is meant to address. Among the near-term plans, they mention master crafting, crafting XP adjustments, improvements to the clan and character UI, new emotes, performance optimization, and the ability to purchase items from any market stall within a single valley. And now, my commentary. As you know, I've been playing Pax Dei daily since the very beginning of early access. I still like this game, and I genuinely believe it has enormous potential. But when I read some of these declarations, I start to wonder whether the developers are really seeing the game from the same perspective as the players. Let's start with the founders. The developers have repeatedly emphasized how grateful they are to those who supported the game before launch. In practice, that gratitude was meant to be expressed through things like unique decorative recipes. Meanwhile, the recent change to the Griffin chest recipe feels like a slap in the face to those very people. A chest that was previously easy to craft and accessible to virtually every founder suddenly became extremely expensive and gated behind a very high carpentry level. As a result, only a small fraction of founders can now craft it themselves. If this is meant to be a form of appreciation for founders, then something is clearly off. When it comes to monetization, it's fair to say the model is relatively reasonable. Anyone can play without a subscription after a one-time purchase. Maintaining a single plot is quite easy using in-game currency. Of course, one could argue that paying upkeep during periods of inactivity is inconvenient. Still, given the relatively low price of the game, this feels like a minor issue. It's also worth remembering that an expired plot doesn't mean your items are lost. Everything from the core plot area goes into your redeeming queue. The bigger problem lies in the development of core systems. Yes, the foundations of a player-driven economy exist, but at this stage, they are simply not enough. There are no buy orders, and there is no meaningful in-game item search for the market. You can use external websites to browse and search market listings, but that's a workaround. It breaks immersion, and it feels like a temporary improvised solution. Cooperative building and social gameplay also look great on paper. In practice, however, they are heavily limited by the lack of plot permission systems and meaningful clan roles. Inviting an outsider into a clan either comes with the risk of massive losses or requires completely cutting them off from crafting infrastructure. Naturally, this pushes communities into small, closed groups of friends. Open exploration and discovery also sound more like promises than reality. There are already websites with maps showing the location of practically everything. On top of that, most of the world consists of safe home valleys, while truly wild areas are relatively limited. Lioness could be an interesting exploration space, but PvP alone is enough to discourage a large portion of the player base. And what about the regions announced long ago? Gothia, Iberia, Anatolia. I'm not expecting all of them at once, but even a single new region with unique resources and no building allowed would be a real incentive to travel and explore. This could be reinforced through a series of in-game events. First, collective efforts to open gates to a new region. Then, gradual exploration and stabilization of the area. And only later, the creation of the first home valleys, starting near the entrance gate and pushing deeper over time. That kind of process would be an adventure in itself and a long-term goal for the community. And that brings us to the plans for 2026. I'm glad the developers declare a willingness to improve the game and strengthen the community. But when I read statements about Pax Dei being at its best when the world is alive, villages growing, trade thriving, and shared adventures unfolding, and then compare that vision with the actual plans for 2026, I start to question whether those ideas truly align. Master crafting is a nice addition, but it's a detail. Crafting XP rebalancing may be necessary, but without specifics, it inspires as much concern as hope. Improved clan and character UI? Without a permission system, that's cosmetic. New emotes? They look good in promotional materials, but without changes to how they're used, they'll remain a novelty for a small subset of players. Performance improvements? Always welcome, but that's not something to applaud. It's an absolute baseline expectation for an MMO, not a reason for pride. And finally, the most important point. The ability to purchase items from any market stall across an entire valley with a single click. For many players, that's convenience. But Pax Dei was never meant to be a convenient, streamlined game. It was advertised as a social sandbox MMO, a game where travel, trade, encounters, and shared projects matter. This solution reduces the need to move around. It weakens village building, local trade hubs, and clan projects. More importantly, it opens the door to further simplifications. And it raises an obvious question. What comes next? Automated group finders? Teleports to events? I understand why such systems appeal to many players. They're common in modern MMORPGs. But I keep coming back to one fundamental question. After introducing these solutions, will Pax Dei still be the game we were promised? Or will it become just another theme park MMO, perhaps with a better building system that fades into obscurity after a few years? There's one more crucial point worth addressing. Developers need to be extremely careful with decisions that are easy to introduce but very hard to reverse later. Servers are a good example. When the player population started growing, the developers chose to open additional worlds, but there was another option. They could have done nothing and consciously waited it out, assuming that at Pax Dei's current stage of development, a future population decline was inevitable. Rising frustration from overcrowding could have been eased with the promise of a new region coming later. This would have been a harder decision. It would have required more resistance to community pressure, but it would also have been cheaper to maintain, more consistent with the vision of a single living world, and most importantly, more engaging for players. It would have left room for future expansion, instead of creating a structural problem that is now extremely difficult to solve without breaking the promise of no wipes. Another example is repairs. Players complained that advanced equipment could only be repaired at advanced crafting stations. Instead of introducing a more logical solution, the developers chose a different path. Everything can now be repaired everywhere. As a result, weapons, armor, and clothing can be repaired even on a chopping block. Convenient? Yes. Expected? Not really. This change didn't bring relief. Instead, it sparked a wave of criticism, accusations of undermining the game's depth, and repeated calls to revert the system, but reverting it is now difficult because some players have already grown accustomed to it. And that's why, even though I still like Pax Dei and continue to see enormous potential in this game, I'm currently playing without a subscription. More and more often, I feel that the game is drifting away from what it was originally meant to be. In its current state, I couldn't confidently recommend it to anyone. Fans of theme park MMORPGs will find Pax Dei too primitive and lacking many familiar systems. Meanwhile, fans of sandbox MMOs and isekai aesthetics will still find the social systems underdeveloped. And unfortunately, the current development direction doesn't give me enough reason for optimism. I would love to make a video a year from now saying that Pax Dei is the best sandbox MMO on the market. But for that to happen, the developers need to return to the fundamentals and remind themselves what this game was meant to be, before it turns into something entirely different. Thank you for your time and for watching this video. If you like my content and want me to create more, please give it a thumbs up. A thumbs down is also fine if you don't like it. This way, I'll know whether it's worth making this kind of material. A thumbs up lets me know it's worth spending time on. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and write something in the comments as well. Comments help boost the reach because YouTube sees interest in my videos and suggests them to other people when there are many comments. That's why I'm asking for a comment to help this video get better viewership. If you have an idea for a topic you'd like me to cover in the next video, share it in the comments. I'd love to hear your suggestions. I'm looking forward to your opinions and ideas. See you in the next video.